All right, welcome, bienvenidos to Big Game Hunters, MagnaOnAir's Big Game Hunters. We got Jason Berard, Landon Hood.
Hola.
Today we're going to talk about an issue that a lot of people bring up: meetings, company meetings. Are they a waste of time? I think if you've been involved in a corporate environment before, you've come across, the big executive team meetings and the weekly e-meetings and the ramp up and the prep. And we're going to take a look today at sort of how we can avoid ways of avoiding, wasting your time on there, and if they really are a waste of time. So, Jason, have you come across being in a company where you've just been bombarded with scheduled meetings and meeting prep and all of that?
Yeah, 100%. I think the big thing that I started, I'm pretty new to the corporate world. I'm a bit scruffy looking today, but obviously I'm 24 years old, right? So have I been in that many corporate settings? No, in all honesty, I haven't, right? But do I read a lot of books about people that are in meetings? Absolutely, right? Do I read a lot? Well, one of the books that I want to touch point on that I've really learned a lot about was on the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And he actually has a whole chapter on meetings and how to get around them and how to better allocate your time and your resources into being productive, right? So we have meetings here, and I've had meetings at other companies. In my honest opinion, I think that meetings to call them a waste of time is not fair. I just think that we miss the target with them. They're just when you have a meeting, a lot of times you're missing the target. They go too long. There's no actual purpose in them. You talk, people are distracted. There's just so many elements, and in a very large company, I think that would be a massive waste of time.
I mean, when you're dealing with a large corporation that has executives and multiple layers of management, you look at, there was a study done where a big company, they looked at their weekly executive meetings and how many hours in a year was actually spent on that, how many man hours. And when you combine the executive meetings themselves, the meeting prep, the line management sort of team meetings that sort of prepare the guys and give meeting and sort of, work assessments to the executives, and then their teams underneath them that give assessments, it was over 300,000 hours in a year were spent in man hours on that one weekly executive meeting, which is crazy when you think every person has 8,700 hours, about that in a year. So that means many people's whole, and that's so you look at the company and you wonder exactly what they're getting up to. And I've been involved in that sort of corporate environment where and it makes sense. Meetings generally speaking can be very productive when you're taking a step back. You're looking at the overall game plan. You're looking at timelines and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Absolutely, but you're right, when things aren't on the same page, when there's not a lot of planning, when there's not a lot of buy-in, when people are afraid to speak up, you'll find oftentimes people will not want to disappoint or sort of engage their upper management with lowering expectations. So when you talk about some of the complex issues that are involved with some of these meetings and talk about trying to hit certain deadlines, sometimes people steer away from the big stuff and go to the trivial stuff, and that's sort of the law of triviality that can happen. Where
I think meetings are meant to be for big picture talk, right? When we're talking little things, a lot of the elements in a meeting can be just outsourced virtually now, right? Emails, communication platforms like Slack are amazing, and there's email, there's other ways around it, and I think if you're establishing, if you're in a startup space right now, and don't get me wrong, I've built a company, I've built a startup, a lot of meetings, right? A lot of meetings, a lot of strategizing,
especially with a small company.
You're trying to figure out how you're going to disrupt the world or put an industry on its head, but you need to create a culture that's not so reliant on them, especially if you want to have a virtual work environment or flex work. That's very important. I think one of the things that's very important, like Scrum meetings, for example, those are every day you elicit the response from the user, and then you in an agile environment, you make it happen that day, right? That's important. You get everyone in the huddle and you get it going, and then you start the day of work. I understand that.
Development cycles, sales cycles, these are important.
And the only way that Scrum impedes things is if you're attracting talent in the tech world, sometimes they want to see that flex work schedule, and with Scrum, you really just can't. Every day that you got to meet, right? Every day, let's go over it, let's get it going, get the huddle going, and let's get to work. But in terms of a large corporate level meeting, I think that if you're looking to get out of it, or if you're trying to limit your hours spent sitting at a chair, not even being productive, I think you approach your manager and just say, hey, listen, I've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to focus on this. Are you okay if I speak to Jenny after the meeting to get all of this is from Tim Ferriss, by the way, speak to Jenny after the meeting to get all of the details that we went through.
Right.
And that if there's a meeting a day, well, that will save you 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week.
And there are status reporting tools that can allow for some flexibility there. So everybody doesn't have to spend the hour in their day all at the same time, because you're right, in 2015, people need flexibility. There's other stuff going on. So you can have everybody being able to give an update, but not have to do it simultaneously.
Yeah. And I think you have sometimes you got to make sure they have the right people in the meeting, right? Because like a lot of people use their meetings to check their emails, and like that's like it's not multitasking. Multitasking is impossible. It's literally just like going there and being like, yeah, okay, yeah, well, how about this? How about this?
Yeah, exactly. So you see that, and I've seen that in meetings before where you have people, and that's why there's a few tips in terms of really making sure that productivity is going on in meetings. Ban mobile phones. That should be right off the bat, because you see that. You see executives, you see people in the company just sort of trying to check their email while that's happening. That cannot happen.
I call people, and they're like, I'm just in a meeting right now. I'm like, well, and then I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. I'll call you back. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to walk out of the room. I'm just going to walk out of the room. I'm like, what?
No, exactly. And so, I mean, that is really important, keeping the meetings on time. You know, if somebody doesn't show up on time for the meeting, which always happens, start the meeting without them. Have it go in, have them walk in, or have them not show up. Because if you don't set those times, and if you have them run long, if you don't have a set period of time, there's going to be so much wasted hours and so much sort of trivial off-topic stuff that can happen. Yeah. And that's why you have to focus on making sure that you have an agenda for that meeting and sticking to it.
I think like we spend a lot of time already talking about meetings and what they do. I think the big thing is, what do you think? Like, if you're watching the show, like, we really need to hear, like, do you think meetings are a waste of time? Like, how would you improve that process? Like, what do you think? Like, what are ways to improve it? Like, obviously you can't just cut meetings out of the equation. Like, they have to happen so that you know everyone's on the same page, besides just like phone calls and emails. So, well, how do you think the process should be improved?
Well, other than, them having the targeted agenda and making sure everybody's on time and making sure that mobile phones and everything are off, make sure that only the decisions and actions that are meant to be done are recorded. Oftentimes people will spend a lot of time in meetings recording everything that goes on, and so you'll have maybe 40 or 50 potential things that are happening. Somebody comes up with an idea in the meeting, people write it down, then everybody has to spend maybe an hour looking into that topic. Go into that meeting, understand what the agenda is, and only discuss those topics. And if you do get off topic, just don't record that stuff, because that's it for another time. Set another meeting for that if you have to. Set another or have an email conversation about that. But honestly, I think it's just important to stick to script, and it's also very important to manage expectations and make sure that people aren't there to perform and aren't there just to have that meeting. Because so often, I've done project management before where I was communicating in between executives, and I said, okay, are you going to have it ready for this time? And they said, oh, hell no. But then in the meeting in front of the executive, they're afraid to say, oh, hell no. They're, well, potentially, we'll see what happens. Make sure that lines of communication are wide open as well.
Yeah, and I think it's an easy setting, like when there's a lot of people in the room, to kind of ramble and rant on a bit.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait, hang on a second. The meetings go over time. All that I'm saying, like I said, I'm not going to pretend like I'm the corporate expert on this. Is from my standpoint, is if meetings are the way that people portray them to be, and what your experiences are, that they're long and sort of not targeted, you're just wasting time into production. You're just getting in the way of productive efforts into results. I think the biggest thing, to summarize this, is to create a results-oriented workforce. People that are spending time in a meeting that isn't really going anywhere, that could be time well spent to building the company and at getting that market share. It's tougher and tougher today to grab the pieces of the pie, and you need everyone in your organization to be fully ramped up,
Find
ready
that balance,
to go.
Execution over, sometimes strategy is important, but execute as well.
Add a little motivation to every meeting too. That's what I think. Like, if I'm in a meeting, like, I'm just there kind of hanging out, but if you end that on a good note, I'm be like, my man, let's go. Let's roll. It's the big game. Is there any other points? I'm going to close it out. Any other points?
We're good.
It's the Big Game Hunters coming to you next week. Thank you for tuning into the jungle. LinkedIn, YouTube, SoundCloud, Big Game Hunters.
Carrier pigeon. We got it all.
Carrier pigeon, any form of communication, FedEx, DHL, whatever it is. #MagnaOnAir, MagnaSearchGroup.tv. What do you think? Are meetings a waste of time? We want to know. Cheers.
Big game.